Hello everyone, thanks for joining us today on our Nonprofit Fundamentals video series. Today we wanted to talk a little bit about investments for nonprofits. So if you're a nonprofit and you've been using a lot of your donations and contributions for your operations, and one day you get in a large grant and you finally decide that it's time to invest for your organization, we want to talk about where you start. So today Adam and I are joined with Marie from our SAX Wealth Advisors group, and we're joined with Lauren, who's our consultant for our nonprofits. And so we're going to talk a little bit about nonprofits. So, ladies, our nonprofit just got a large contribution. Where do they start when they want to invest?
Besides the obvious answer of call you too. Skip that one. We'll go
Call
to
us.
Yeah.
Call us. Yes. So the first place to start is to have a very robust investment policy statement. And in fact, I would always advise nonprofits, even before you get that large or unexpected donation, you should always have an investment policy statement so that you are prepared for such an event. I'm going to defer to Marie to talk a little bit about what an investment policy statement is.
Yeah, I think, the term investment policy statement can be a little bit intimidating, but really what you're trying to lay out as an organization is really what is the intention of this money, what is the purpose of this money, and not only how will the money be invested, how it will be governed. So some of the things that we put into the investment policy statement is who will be making, first of all, the starting asset allocation, so how it will be invested, how much risk we're willing to take within the organization, and usually that's tied to what the money is going to be used for. We also will talk about what kind of returns we may expect from this money. Will we be spending any of this money on a regular basis? Is it really meant for posterity's sake to be used, sometime in the future, at some indefinite point in the future? And then who is going to be governing this investment policy statement? How often will we look at it? How often will it be reviewed? Where will the information come from? So like I myself as an investment manager on many of nonprofit endowment funds and other type of funds will usually provide information to the board, to the committees if there's a finance committee, to management of the organization to help them really figure out, okay, this is how we've done, this is what we're doing, and this is the expectation for this money going forward. Typically, if you get an unencumbered gift, you really have a lot of latitude with that money. Sometimes I like to say the sky's the limit, right? Because you can do anything you want with it, but you want to lay out very specifically, again, how the money's going to be invested, how often the investment policy statement is going to be reviewed, and what are we looking for over time? I think that's really the key, to have that continuity. And as I always say, this is the kind of thing or the kind of document where years from now, if somebody looks back and says, what were they thinking of when that money came in? What was the thought process? How did we get to where we are today from then? Mm-hmm. Somebody should be able to look at this and say, oh, now we know what they were thinking. This is what the thought process was behind it. And I think that's very, very helpful, because when you do need to make changes, you always kind of go back to, okay, we started here, these were the circumstances at the time, this is what's changed, and then it could lead to a change. And I think, as you make changes, I would say the investment policy statement is a living, breathing document. You can make changes too, but you want to document those changes. Why are you making these changes now? How are these changes going to be implemented? Who's going to monitor the changes? So everybody has a role. You want to make sure that's very clearly defined within the investment policy statement. So, we usually have a template that we go off of that has very specific things that we want to make sure that we mention. But again, it's really your organization's document. So whatever you feel is necessary to put in there, I always say more is better. So.
Is there a best practice of what should really be in the policy statement, or is it kind of open-ended?
So I think certain things, first of all, the investment allocation. So that's usually how much do you want in the equity markets, which is going to be more risky, how much do you want in the bond markets, which is going to be more conservative, how much liquidity the investments need to throw off. In other words, are you going to be spending X amount every year? That needs to be put in there. How often the investments are going to be reviewed for performance. When will that happen? Is it at a board meeting, quarterly, semi-annually, annually? Those kinds of milestones. If there's a finance committee, very often we like to work with finance committees to really formulate and get all the detail together and then present to the full board and say this is what we've come up with. So hopefully there's those people are in force already. But those are really the most important things, is the asset allocation and whether or not, money's gonna be used on a regular basis. And what kind of, are you willing to take more risk? If you're willing to take more risk, you're gonna get more return. If you're not willing to take as much risk, then you have to forego some return. So again, you have to think about, what am I using this money for?
Right.
Short term, long term, what is
Exactly.
being used
And
for.
things can always be changed. You can start off, very often if this is the first time, a board is investing, you can start off more conservative to get your sea legs, as it were, and then proceed as time goes on. Whatever you do today doesn't mean you have to do it, for all of eternity. You can make those changes.
And I would say one of the ways to kind of figure that out is to really start with a risk tolerance assessment, so that everybody understands, between the board and the leadership, kind of what tolerance you have for risk, and that will actually inform then your investment policy statement.
Right, exactly. So very often we can look historically, if you had a portfolio with 40% equity, this is the average return, this is the amount of risk or volatility you could see. So we have the historical data to help you make those decisions and know, what would it feel like if you put all this money, invested it today, and then this happened, right? It went down 10%, 15, 5%, whatever it is, right? Because that's the reality. Markets certainly go up and down over time.
Good points.
Definitely good points. So, change it a little up here. So, I got a question for, I guess, both of you. So, I see this a lot, both sides of this, where there's a lot of restricted funds, restricted investments. Sometimes they commingle them all into one account. Sometimes they have separate accounts for every single fund. What, in your opinion, is the best practice in those situations? Should it be commingled or separated?
So my opinion, just from being in the nonprofit sector, is I would not commingle, right? I think it's really important from an accounting standpoint and just ease of understanding that operation funds and investment funds, right, and fundraising funds be in separate accounts, so that you can easily account for the revenue but also the expenses against those accounts. I like it nice and neat and clean.
I would agree with that. I think that once you start commingling, it gets a little harder to see the history of that account and what funds would have been used for, especially if they have a very specific purpose. So I would say, even though it may not be as organizationally efficient to have, many, many different accounts, I think it does make more sense to do it that way.
Gives you a clearer picture of the return, what the portfolio
sense.
has done.
Exactly, and then the history of it, the ins and outs, any money going
Yeah.
in and out. It's cleaner.
I agree.
Okay, sounds good. Answer my question.
Were you wanting to commingle? Is that why?
No, I was
Commingle fan?
curious. I have no preference in this.
And so one of the things we just wanted to remind our nonprofits about, a little bit of accounting, because most of our talk here is not really accounting, is that when you have an investment portfolio and you have your unrealized gains and losses, that they have to be reflected through your income statement, through your revenue and expenses each year. So that's something that for-profits used to be able to record a little differently through their equity accounts a few years back. So from time to time, we see that recorded incorrectly for nonprofits. So we just want to throw in a little accounting reminder here that any of those unrealized gains and losses in your portfolio do unfortunately need to go through your income statement, even though some of that unrealized is really just temporary and due to the market. So, yeah. I think that's all we got.
That's it. All right. Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thanks for joining us.